But my name is Ryan Post. I'm a system engineer for Veeam Software here covering the Mid-Atlantic region, everything from North Carolina up to PA. But I would be your local technical resource for anything Veeam. We also have my colleague back in the back, Jason Keller, who is our SLED rep dedicated to Replication accounts. So, just a quick question. I do see some familiar faces, customers. Anybody who all uses Veeam currently? Great. Great. Makes it easy. Who hasn't seen Veeam before? Doesn't know much about Veeam? Great. So we've got a nice little mixture. Hopefully, cover a little bit of everything for people that are new, don't know Veeam, but also ones that currently use tidbits that we'll see. Potentially in version 9.5, which is slated later this year. Just another couple questions. VMware customers, infrastructure, raise your hand. Hyper-V? A little bit of Hyper-V, sounds good. So there are a few minor differences between what VMware and Hyper-V and what Veeam brings to the table. And it really just comes down to underlying architecture. As you can guess, I mean, two different hypervisors. Technology is different, so we work a little bit differently with those. But we'll start with the Veeam overview, talk a little bit what's new in V9, what's coming up in version 9.5, and then just wrap up, and we'll stick around here for questions until the next session. So come by the booth, and we can handle those there. But starting off, I mean, Veeam, we like to focus on availability for the modern data center. Ultimately, there's really 5 categories we really like to look at when it comes to Veeam. It starts with high-speed recovery. Right? Be able to recover your data faster in the infrastructure. Data loss, if the user can't get to work, I mean, that's obviously potentially a waste of time. So high-speed recovery, one feature we really like to talk a little bit is instant Veeam recovery. Our ability to actually run a VM from its backup file, have it up and running in a couple minutes, and eventually then migrate it back to the production storage to hydrate state. Data loss avoidance, right? Reducing that downtime as far as the data loss. So a recovery point objective, having restore points, say every 15 minutes if you like, can be faster, really depending on architecture. A lot of things play into that. But I'd say definitely 15 minutes is a good average we've seen in the field. So verified protection, making sure that your backups are actually good. You test their backups currently. And he uses Veeam to test backups. So our feature, Sure Backup, test those, runs them through an automated process. You can also use that as an on-demand sandbox, which leads into our leverage data. So leveraging what you have available for an on-demand sandbox. Test the Windows updates and patches, upgrades, anything you would like to do without, say, doing it on the production VM first, or having a separate environment to actually run these tests. And then lastly, complete visibility. We have a product called Veeam 1. It's our monitor reporting solution. We also have a management pack for System Center Operations Manager. But both of these are going to bring in the VMware architecture, Hyper-V architecture, extend backup and replication to really bring that complete visibility for your virtual infrastructure, everything from data protection, but then to the hardware, the VMs themselves. So just a little bit about the Veeam architecture for the new people to Veeam. It does start with a Veeam backup server. That's what you see here in the middle. When you talk about simplicity, our install process is a typical Windows install, something you've been used to for years now, next. You're up and running. Right? This is the brains behind the operation, job scheduling, resource, load balancing. Most of the restores will happen here. Where we also have what we call backup proxy servers. And these are going to be the brawn, right? The heavy lifters, doing the dedupe, doing the compression within the data we're pulling from the production storage. And then we send that to our third piece of architecture, the backup repository. So that could be any type of disk storage that you have. Whether you repurpose a physical server, throw some newer disks in there, whether it be a NAS device, we do have some integration with dedupe appliances, Exagrid, HP Store Once, and Data Domain. So not only are we looking at backups, sitting on disks that are deduped and compressed, think of that for long-term archiving, but we also help with disaster recovery as well. At the top of the diagram here, we do have replication, replicating between a VMware infrastructure to another VMware infrastructure, Hyper-V to Hyper-V. but having these ready-to-go registered virtual machines that you can power on manually, or what we prefer in Veeam is the failover process. We have planned failovers, things to take advantage of there. We have WAN acceleration for any low bandwidth between any remote offices that may be out there, or maybe a co-location. Really caching blocks that we send during our replication job, during the process that we call backup copy, to make sure we don't have to send every single block every single time. So, guest interaction proxy. This is actually a new piece to version 9. We leverage VSS within Microsoft applications, do create SSA, SQL, Exchange servers. All used to communicate back to the Veeam server. So in multi-site, say, deployments, if you had one Veeam server, maybe deployed a proxy and the repository to the other side, everything would communicate back to the virtual machine's guest OS, back to the Veeam server, and then back across the WAN with that. So depending on what else is happening, that process could take long, it could be impacted by other traffic. So we've actually gave the ability to present that to another server, another VM, a proxy in the architecture, so all that work can happen locally. It doesn't have to traverse the WAN. And another piece we'll talk more in detail here in a minute is our scale-out backup repository, taking a group of repositories and making them look as one. So as your data grows, as it usually is, it's going to go ahead and make it easier to add another repository to the pool. We'll move backwards around as needed. And then we also added in version 9 a standalone console. So having a laptop, desktop that you're working on, your workstation, you don't have to RDP into the Veeam server anymore. If you have multiple people working within Veeam, you're not fighting over those RDP sessions. So we really like talking about the 3-2-1 backup. You've probably heard this a lot with all the other backup products out there, but having 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, and having one off site. With Veeam, we can do this in a couple of different ways. Primarily a backup copy job. Top of the diagram here, we have secondary storage on site. This is a great option if you are leveraging a DB appliance or potentially looking at DB appliances. Backing up to something first that's, say, a Windows server or a NAS device, a little bit faster disk. You don't need the capacity, maybe short-term retention, but then having longer archiving, GFS-style retention with a backup copy, say your weeklies, your monthlies, your quarterlies, say sitting on a DB appliance. Doing the same process off-site to a remote office, to a co-location. We have Veeam service providers that provide Cloud Connect storage to send backups to. And then we also have our tape integration as well, offloading from a disk to tape option. So a little bit more about disaster recovery. We have our replication, our planned failover. So something we added in version 8 was that ability to set order in which VMs will actually fail over in. That still includes all the re-IP functionality that will take place within the rules you've set up. But really delaying VMs, making sure the domain controller is up first. Then you can have the SQL server and then the application that uses that SQL server. You have the option to do just a single virtual machine. It doesn't have to be one of these failover plans. And then with our planned failover, we actually make sure the most recent data is at the DR location. So if you know, say, some bad weather's coming through, or there's going to be a power outage, something planned, let's go ahead and run the replication job 2 more times. Once while the virtual machine is running in production, we'll then shut it down, run it 1 more time, make sure everything gets sent over, we'll fail over, and now it's running in the DR location. For data center migration, we can do a permanent failover, consolidates from the snapshot or store point that we're leveraging, and you're running from the VMDK. So there's this new home. So I just mentioned this about a minute ago, Veeam Cloud Connect. So with the Veeam service providers, it's something we gave them the option to leverage and really have a cloud repository. We do have service providers that leverage Veeam as their backup product of choice in their hosted infrastructure, their managed services practice. This just extends what they're able to do with the Veeam infrastructure. So it's hosted offsite backups. They actually present this out via a public DNS name IP address. And it's a single SSL connection. So there's no VPN requirement, that complexity, to send backups to a Veeam service provider. Another great option here with this setup is that because they are leveraging Veeam in their data center for their hosted infrastructure, they could potentially restore your backups into their data center. And then at that point, maybe provide some of those connections to run. So if you don't have a remote office, that is a great option, leveraging a Veeam service provider to do that. We have plenty out there to choose from. Encryption, that's always important, making sure the data is safe. AS256, so in-flight, at rest, with our backups, with the replication, with the in-flight process. We also have lost password protection. I know those are tough. Sometimes you set a long password. Maybe someone who set the password leaves. We can get that back through our enterprise manager service through some validation. So incident Veeam recovery. So to kind of map out the process here of what takes place is typically a virtual machine goes down. I'm sure you'll probably have the one user that's going to complain, unless they just don't want to work, which that might make it easier for y'all. But potentially, we're going to present a NFS data store directly to VMware, or some built-in tools with Hyper-V. We're going to create a VM directly from our backup storage. So it's going to be up and running in a couple minutes. At that process, think of this as a spare tire, right? Shouldn't go as fast, you shouldn't go as far on a spare tire. I'm guilty of probably exceeding that. But let's migrate it back. So storage vMotion within VMware will leverage that as running. Live migration from Hyper-V. So there is no downtime. If those features aren't available, we have our own process where ultimately we run our replication jobs, ultimately in the background, create a hydrated version of the VM from the backup. And then we're going to take all the changes that have happened as it ran in the incident VM recovery state back to the fully hydrated VM, and then we're going to switch it over. So there's going to be a little bit of downtime with that, but put in proper planning. Do that at the end of the day, whenever it be suitable within the infrastructure. So virtual lab and sure backup. Again, coming back to leveraging data, verified protection, make sure the backups actually work. So the same technology that we just saw with incident VM recovery, taking the virtual machines, running from the backup file, but this time in a completely isolated environment that we'll create within VMware, within Hyper-V. This is typically what we call an application group, dependencies, and then you can link other backup jobs to test all the other VMs that you have within the infrastructure, 2, 3, 4, 5 at a time, depending on what that backup storage is, how many it can handle with that. We'll go through the automated process, testing the applications, testing the OS, testing the network connection, and send a nice little email saying everything was successful. If there were any errors, definitely something to document, right, for testing purposes, and how you remedy the situation, either by running another full backup, whatever it may be. And then keeping this running, right, as that on-demand sandbox. We can log in, we can test within this infrastructure. Everything's isolated, so everything's running as the same IP scheme as it would have in production. We've just masqueraded that as a whole. That way, if you were to break something, stop the sure backup job, it erases all the changes, and you're left with your clean backup. So anybody out there using Veeam Endpoint Backup? Great. So this is a free tool that we have. It is designed for laptops and desktops. Again, free. It does support Server 2008 R2 and newer. Depending on what's running on those servers, it may be a good fit. Is it designed to back up Exchange single databases? No. Are there people doing it? Yes. So keep in mind it's not what it's designed for, but we are able to target a Veeam backup repository. And from that Veeam backup repository, inside the Veeam backup and replication console, we can do a file level restore. We can also export the contents out as a virtual disk. Okay.
That's something I specifically came in here to ask about. So that can be restored as a virtual disk?
Yes. So you have the option of export out of the VMDK, VHD, VHDX, and from there, do what you want with it. So a lot of people call it poor man's P2V, right? Something that we didn't design it for. There's plenty of products that do that great. VMware has it built in, Hyper-V has it built in. So again, this is really for protecting those endpoints and providing a free solution to do so. So the complete visibility, come to that, the last of the 5, with monitoring and reporting. So VMware, Hyper-V, our backup infrastructure. With Veeam 1, you're getting, with the backup side of things, about 32 reports that you don't get built in with backup and replication. So everything from running a report, making sure your VMs are in a certain recovery point objective. Are you going to pass or fail that? Making sure you're using sure backup, running a verified VMs report. Someone comes to you, hey, are you testing your backups? Let me see your reports for the past 3 months. Well, if you're unsure backup, go into Veeam 1, run it, hand in a report, shows everything has been verified and tested and was successful. Again, if there was some issues, maybe there were some warnings, there was errors, you can have that note that you made of what you did to remedy the situation. From a VMware and Hyper-V perspective, in a monitoring side, we'll come back up. From a monitoring side, really the top-down infrastructure view, everything from vCenter down to the hosts, the clusters, the VMs, the data stores. Same thing on Hyper-V. You can add in SCVMM or the cluster, see the hosts, the VMs, the volumes. We have specific views for just local volumes, but also cluster shared volumes as well. So, important piece to Veeam 1, if you are looking to potentially try Veeam Backup or Replication, we do have the trials on our website, is our backup infrastructure assessment. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at your infrastructure you have in place and pick out issues that may be out there that could affect backup or replication from working properly. For example, in VMware tools today not installed. Independent disks, they can't be snapshotted. So we want to change that to a compatible disk type within VMware. Same thing within Hyper-V, pass-through disks, potentially we'll pick out, making sure that Windows is up to date as well. We'll do that on both sides also. We also have a change rate estimation report. If you don't have a good understanding of what your change rate is on a per VM basis, we can run that from a week, a month, so you can get different views of what it looks like to really plan for backup repository space and what kind of disk you would want to implement to store Veeam backups. So we have at-a-glance dashboards. This is part of the Veeam reporter. Log in, see what's going on. Just first thing in the morning, see if there's any errors you may need to go check out, whether it be on the VMware Hyper-V side, whether it be within backup or replication, which you may have already got an alert for that from backup or replication. This is kind of a quick screenshot of the monitoring side, what the dashboard looks like with some of the summary, the errors, the fail, the successes for backup side. So that is our data protection view. Where as you can see, we also have the infrastructure view, which includes the VMware and Hyper-V components. And of course, all the reporting that we have can be scheduled, can be modified within a certain template. Save it how you like it. Have it sent to a shared folder on schedule. Have it sent to an email, multiple people, based on your needs. So capacity planning, really giving you the hard numbers of why you need to add another host, why you need to get a new SAN, based on how you're growing. I know budgetary numbers are a lot of times an issue, and having these numbers here to back that up really helps, again, with providing why new hardware is needed. Probably the most popular reports that we have within Veeam 1. Another popular report before we jump in, we do have a Vizio report. So be able to run a report directly in the Vizio of your architecture. So anybody that wants to put Veeam 1 in, run that. Everybody else thinks you work really hard and you have a nice poster of the virtual network or your storage network on the wall. So definitely try that one out. So what's new in V9? So a lot of the stuff we covered has been in Veeam since version 1. A lot of stuff like instant recovery, sure backup came version 5. So we've really added features every release that are beneficial to make backups run efficiently, restore a lot quicker. But version 9, we added a lot of great features here as well. So coming back to the scale-out backup repository, again, creating a pool of multiple storage devices to look as one within Veeam. So past versions, you add a data domain in, you can target that data domain with however many jobs. But if you want to add another repository, you create new jobs that can go to it. Now, we can take different types of storage, we can have all sorts of the same storage, depending on how it is, and with that, move backups around as need be. So there's two policies that we have within the scale-out backup repository. There's a performance policy, meaning we can say, hey, I have this DB appliance, it's slower disk, a lot of capacity, let's put my full backups there, right, on the weekends, let it run on the weekend. And let's use, say, the direct attached storage, or JBOD, that has faster disk for the incrementals during the week. As we add, say, another extent into the mix, maybe an NAS device, we'll move backups around as need be based on your policy. We also have a data locality policy as well, meaning a full backup and its subsequent incrementals, or if it's a reverse incremental method, will stay on the same extent. So one thing to keep in mind here, in our Enterprise Edition, you can have 3 extents, but with our Enterprise Plus, you have unlimited. So as repository space is running low in Enterprise Plus, you add a new repository in, we'll move it around, makes it simple, adding new backup storage space. Doesn't have to be the same storage, right? Again, it can be completely mixed and different performance of disks. So coming back a little bit with our DD compliance integration. So when you start looking at the data domain, we have DD Boost integration. With HP Store ones, we have Catalyst integration. Added that in version 9 as well. But the biggest thing we've added, this is really across the board for any DD compliance, whether it's Quantum DXI, again, the ones we've already talked about, and it's a per Veeam backup file chain. So ultimately how we used to process backups is we had a backup job, you had say 10 virtual machines, and we'll just start with VM1, and however many resources between the proxies and repositories can run will happen at once. But all that happening is going to come into one stream, going into these DD appliances. So we've actually broken out that we can have now a stream per VM within a job, really enabling you to hit the throughput that you should be able to see on those DD appliances. So it's more efficient. The restores are going to be a little bit quicker as well because we're not having one large file with say 10, 20, 30, 40 VMs. It's going to be per VM, but you're getting that global dedupe across these appliances. So Cloud Connect replication. So we talked about Cloud Connect with service providers sending backups to them. We've given them the option now to set up a replication component. So giving you a amount of RAM, CPU, and data store space, and you can replicate within those parameters to their location. Still via the single SSL connection. You can perform an entire site failover into that infrastructure, partial failover, individual VMs, and all the communication based on the networking that we set up on the back end within Veeam will still communicate between, say, your data center, your users, and that single port to the service provider. So again, it takes that complexity out of not having to stand up the VPN connection, having the same hardware to do that with the service provider, so no cost out of there. Again, however, the service provider does decide to price out, say, Cloud Connect or Cloud Connect replication, that's one thing, but we've taken complexity really down to a single port for everything. So Veeam backup from storage snapshots. So one thing I will mention here, this is ultimately a VMware only feature. Reason being is Hyper-V is actually already somewhat doing this with their VSS hardware provided snapshots that we leverage to larger sheer volume. So when we talk about VMware and you take a snapshot of VM, I know I've done it before. I've left a snapshot open almost a month one time and went to remove it, and it took quite a bit of time. Users complained. So that's one of the things that happens when you start looking at, say, SQL and Exchange that are highly transactional. When you run a backup job, those are growing. You go to remove it, VMware calls it VM stun. So ultimately what we're able to do here is once we take the VMware snapshot, we can then initiate a storage snapshot either on a HP storage device, 3PAR, their Store Virtual VSA, NetApp with their PAS series, EMC with VNX, VNXC devices. But we take that storage snapshot, completely remove the VMware snapshot right away. So it's only open for 20, 30 seconds versus, say, 15, 20, 30 minutes, however long it takes that job to complete. And we're processing from that storage snapshot. So, efficiency, you can see that 20 times faster than some of the other solutions that have this integration. We work really deeply with developers, with these vendors to make sure that we can have the efficiency that we're looking to achieve. But we also have our Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots from these same storage devices. So if you have any of these storage devices that we have support with currently, if you were to install Veeam, you have snapshots sitting out there without a Veeam backup, you could do a restore of a virtual machine, a file level restore, jumping into the Explorers, Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, as well as Oracle, without, again, a Veeam backup. So, again, covering really a RPO throughout the day with a storage snapshot, but then have your off the production storage being compressed backup sitting somewhere else. And then another feature we've added in version 9. So a lot of what we just talked about was really in version 8. from the backup from storage snapshots of Veeam Explorer, but we did add EMC, VNX, DNXE in version 9. But we also added the on-demand sandbox of storage snapshots. So again, leveraging storage snapshots that are already out there. Use that as a test bed. Again, don't have to have additional hardware for this. We can spin these images up from the storage snapshot in that virtual lab, giving you a better performance. So we talked about Sure Backup. Those are backups running from the deduped and compressed state. Think about trying to test the 3 or 4 VMs running in that state. Performance is not going to be there, right? I mean, it gets the job done. It's going to take a little bit longer processing. Here, we're leveraging the storage, right? We can get those running directly from there and do the test on that. So with our application explorers, Exchange, we've added just a couple of logging features for any type of legal matters, just keeping track of what's been logged, what's been restored. For Active Directory, we added group policy objects, so we'll be able to go in at a granular level and restore those back to the production domain controller. With SharePoint, we included the entire site restore from our Explorer, so mounting that up. And for both SharePoint and Exchange, it is 2010, 2013 supported with that. SQL, we've added the table level restore back into our Explorer, but getting, again, with what we generally do is a point-in-time transactional restore. We do log backups on the SQL side that kind of relate to our Veeam backups, so you can actually take some of that either out of the DBA's hands, or I'm sure they may not want to get rid of that task, but those make it easier associated with your virtual machine backup and the SQL backups together. And then we have Oracle. That was included in version 9. Same process, so being able to do log backups throughout the day. Point-in-time transactional restores. So a couple other features. One I really love is our bit looker. So we actually look into the virtual machines and find dirty blocks. So someone copies 50 gigs of data to that file server, and they decide they don't need it anymore. They go ahead and delete it 20 minutes later. Well, ultimately, we used to see that as contained blocks. We'd have to read that data. But now we'll actually go in through the OS level, make sure we don't actually back up anything that's just dirty blocks that have been zeroed out, resulting in a faster job run with that. And a smaller backup file. Storage level corruption guard. This is something we're going to go and look at a repository, make sure there's nothing at the storage level impacting our backups. So BitRot, that's something we'll look at. If we find anything like that within the repository, we will go into the production data and we will pull out what we need to give us a complete backup file again. The robo enhancements, we talked about one with that guest interaction proxy, being able to deploy that to a virtual machine or a proxy to take that role at a remote office. We also include a mount server. So when we do file level restores within Veeam, typically we'll create the mount for a Windows server to the Veeam server. So again, if that was sitting at a central location, you're trying to do a file level restore from a backup at a remote office, we're trying to make that connection over the WAN. All right, so let's put that on a proxy, let's put that on another machine local to that location, and everything will happen locally for that work. And then the user console, which I've already hit on, be able to install that on your laptop, your desktop, connect them to the Veeam server from there. So what's coming in version 9.5? Couple things out there. Probably one of the biggest is the Nimble integration. So if anybody's leveraging Nimble within their VMware architecture or looking at that, we're going to have the snapshot integration there. We're also going to have Server 2016 support, something we typically like to work with Microsoft as well as VMware on their side to make sure we are supporting their most up-to-date features and versions. But Server 2016, a lot of great, exciting stuff that we're seeing with that, especially on the Hyper-V side, Nano server, and really how it's going to impact how Veeam backups are going to work. And also Veeam Availability Orchestrator. So this is taking disaster recovery to another level. We've had the planned failures, we have the failover plans, but that's just a simple setup, and we're going to have those. This is going to overlay on top of Veeam Backup and Replication, really allowing to create more advanced plans, runbooks, for that failover process. But it's also going to allow for testing purposes, actually running through the test process of powering this up, a bit more intense, better process than Sure Replica in the way we test there. So really making sure that ports are up and running, and then we'll shut everything down. Actually doing more WMI scripting to make sure other pieces and applications are running as well. And then documentation. That's going to be a big component of that as well. documenting these failover plans as processes and be able to present that to whoever may need it, and having that in case you're not around, you have your colleague can run through and, again, process a failover within the image. So really just to wrap up here, again, Veeam, we focus on virtualization. Right? We've done that since day one with our first release, and that's what's really allowed us to be really the #1 virtual machine backup. And it's easy setup, right? Keeping things simple. Next install. Everything is wizard driven as far as setting up the jobs, the restore processes. And it all leads into the fast recovery as well. Instant Veeam recovery. Be able to go in and grab that email, for whoever may be as quick as possible. Maybe not as quick as you want, because then everybody finds out. You can restore that quickly, and you'll be hounded for those deleted emails. But really, lastly, flexibility for all environments. Being a software, we can really fit anywhere, whether it be a virtual machine, a physical box that you want to create as, say, a Veeam appliance, and allowing you to use whatever storage you'd like for that backup. There's no vendor lock-in, say, with an appliance or anything like that. So, flexibility for all environments. And really with that, thank you for y'all's time, and we'll stick around here for any questions, or feel free to jump by the booth, and we'll be there